All right, guys, this is week 4. We're talking about perspective this week, which means we're talking about you and your emotions and your feelings. This is the touchy-feely class. I find this is the one that if you are struggling mentally with trialing, especially if you struggle with any CSW style of trialing, this is kind of the week to really dig in and start thinking about. If you want to share, awesome. But I know it's a really sensitive type concept because we have to be pretty open with ourselves, as well as if you want to share, being open with everybody else. And so it's a hard thing to do. And I know it's not an easy process to go to. So I do recommend that you go through this stuff and like do it for yourself, write it down for yourself. If you are willing to share and you're willing to, like for those who are doing online class and you're willing to participate online, I do find that people who do it will get a lot more out of it, but it doesn't mean that you aren't going to get a lot out and you're just feeling private and just do it at home. But I do find it's worth doing this. Most of the material that I have learned here, most of it, not all, but most, is from Andrea Harrison, who I have taken a lot of classes from. She's at FDSA as well, her own. I've got links for her stuff down below, but she's an amazing mental coach and she works with horses and with dog sports. And she definitely knows how to work through all of that stuff. And she's super kind. So I've taken her classes. It's hard because you have to be open and you have to be willing to share and go through some of that stuff. But if you're able to do something like that and be open with it, it really is a good journey to go through. So what we've talked about so far is goal setting, right? That was week 1, being prepared. That was week 2, and then being present and mental focus. That was last week. So this week, we're talking about the effects of the trial day and a little bit after the trial, okay? I'm trying to leave week 6. We're really going to talk about post-trial stuff, resetting your goals, reframing, and all that kind of fun stuff. But this week, I want to talk about like the immediates, the stuff that's going through your head, the in the moment kind of things that we need to talk about for mental aspect of the team. So when we do this, we're talking about your mental game. And in order to be on your best mental game, you do have to take care of yourself. So I did write a blog post about this, I think it was a year or 2 ago, but it still applies. I read through it all. It's real stuff. I did put more in this lecture than what's in the blog. I noticed that I put a little bit more detail here because I think there's some really important pieces here. So one of them is self-care for your physically, okay? So your physical body. When we're doing this, it's normally long days. We're talking about endurance, and we're talking about endurance not physically and mentally. So you do need your body ready to do the long day. You can't say, okay, I'm going to be on my best mental game and you had no sleep the night before, right? That's a huge impact on how well you can think. They say that if you don't get sleep, it is worse than being drunk on the road, right? Because it affects how you think. It affects how quickly you can change your mind. It can affect your reflexes. So that is a really important thing. So I have a few things in here that have helped me maintain a better sleep routine in order for competition. And I do this away as well as home, right? So if I'm competing on the road or if I'm competing at home, I do find that these tricks do work. So one of them is packing the night before, whether they are packed in your car or just packed at the door, but not having to run around and remember this, remember that, the night before is really important. Even stuff that I'm going to put in the cooler is packed into a small area of my fridge. Then I just basically scoop that whole part of the fridge into my cooler and then I can leave. Putting all of that together before you have to leave will take some of that stress out the night before. Okay. Another one is when you're sleeping, that you have somewhere to write things down. Because I find I have like these running thoughts, and maybe it's stuff that I forgot. Maybe it's stuff that I have to remember. Oh yeah, I didn't look at the briefing yet, right? Little things like that. Write it down somewhere, whether you physically write it down. I put mine in notes in my phone or reminders, and I just say, set a reminder, right? Hey Siri, set a reminder. But something like that allows me to mentally not hold on to it. And it helps me to pick it up next morning. Okay. So something like that can be really helpful because otherwise you're going to be keeping yourself up because you're thinking, I have to remember that in the morning. You're not going to remember it or you're going to keep yourself all night trying to remember it. So let it go and allow yourself to write it down. The next one is a healthy sleep routine. If you don't always sleep healthily, that's going to be a problem. So I do recommend that if you do struggle with sleeping, get into a habit. There's a lot of different ways out there to get into healthy sleep routines. Not that everybody is able to, because I know it's a significant issue for a lot of people. But the more that you can create a good sleeping habit as you are just in your normal life, the more that you can start doing that one. Okay. And then the last one, especially if you're traveling away from home, is bring your pillow with you. Nothing's worse. And I've heard this, I don't know how many times at competitions. Oh, the pillow at the Airbnb was brutal. My neck is so sore. Well, now you're trying to compete with a sore neck and bad sleep. Just bring your pillow with you, especially if you're driving. If you're flying, I understand that's a little bit more difficult. But if you're able to drive and just throw your pillow in there, it will smell familiar, which will help you fall asleep in a strange place, but it also helps your sleep positions become more consistent. So
I had 1 hour of sleep on Friday night.
See, that's not healthy. Makes it harder to think. I do find, like, with all that being said, sometimes if you understand that you are not mentally on your game and you let go a little bit and you go, okay, I can't do this. You're going to have to do this for me. Sometimes that works really well for a well-trained dog. I've been in that situation before. I've actually won a detective search that way because I was judging, not great sleep, had to drive, like, and I'm just like, I can't. Here, just work it. And we did well, right? But letting go sometimes is a good option too, but not always, especially when you get to the higher level NACSW trials, which require that all day focus. More sleep you've got, the better you've got for the day. Okay, so sleeping is one thing. Second one is food, right? So when you're at a trial, it is important to keep your body fed. There's things like blood pressure, blood sugars, protein, fibers, stomach acids, right? I don't know how many people feel ill, right? I can't eat because I'm so nervous. You have to ask yourself to eat something. And normally, if I see people really struggling with the second half of the day, they have not been drinking or they didn't have any protein at lunch. Just pushing yourself to eat just the smallest amount of protein or something will put your brain in a better state and it will put your body in a better state. If you don't have enough water, especially if you're at elevation, it is huge impact on your thought process. So protein is one. I like to do like packaged cheese. Like I just get little sharp cheddar, little packets. Cool. I can know that I've got that protein in me. Crackers, meats, and nuts. You can get like the cheese and crackers, like they're already stackables. You can pretend like you're in elementary school again, right? Have fun with that. Hard-boiled eggs, they're pretty good. Nuts, something that will work for you. Protein bars, protein shakes, something that will get that protein into your system. Your brain needs the protein in order to think. Okay, so that is a key for them. Liquids is going to be super important. Too much sugar or caffeine can be a negative. You have to recognize that aspect of it. But even still, if you're drinking coffee and a little bit of something else, you're going to be better off than drinking nothing, right? So you just need that liquid through your body. When you're at elevation, and it was unbelievable, the impact is Leadville this past year. Yeah, the searches were difficult, but I saw so much bad handling that I have not seen from the same people, because I've watched a lot of the same people compete over the past year. That same handling wasn't happening elsewhere. It was happening in Leadville because it was 10,000 feet. People were not drinking water. They were not understanding the impact of elevation on your body. So if you ever plan on going to Colorado, you have to be drinking. You have to be intaking those fluids so your body has a chance to regulate the blood pressure, because you cannot think properly without that blood pressure in your head. Okay. So recognize that. And then the last one is just some sort of filler. Make sure that you've got just something so that it absorbs within your stomach and then the stomach acid doesn't become a problem. It can affect the dogs. If they are not used to working odor at elevation, it can take them longer to solve a problem, but I don't know if it affects them mentally the same way as elevation. It could, especially if they're not drinking at all, but typically dogs are more able to regulate how much water they need to have, because they don't ignore the physiological aspect of it. We do that so much more. We are like, no, I don't want to drink because I don't want to pee, little things like that. But at heights, and it's funny, like if you go to one of Jill's trials at like Leadville, where it's so high, or Gunnison, she'll be like, everybody should be drinking. If you are not peeing, you are not drinking enough, right? And that's the lecture every morning, because it is so important to have that blood pressure. With that being said, I do put some stuff in my dog's water if I need to keep them drinking at elevation, because I do worry about that. So frozen cubes of chicken broth can work. Small little, even dog food, just tossing in a cookie or something and make them fishing out. It puts that liquid in their mouth and they're more likely, if they are thirsty, to continue drinking. My dogs are pretty good about it because I have trained it as a thing unintentionally and probably not in a good way, but they do drink when I give them water purposely like that. All right, so that's physical. I do find that it is important. And I do find that if a team is really struggling, that's the first question I ask. And that's typically the first thing that's not being met. So you have to meet your needs for your physical body. Okay. Second one is mental. And there's a lot of different things. There's like people that like expertise in mental management and mental self-care, right? That's not what I'm doing here. I'm just giving you the points of the pieces that are most important for scent work for our competition, okay? So the first one is negative self-talk. Most teams will struggle with this at some point, right? And this is the hard part. This is where we have that negative self-talk and it kind of spirals downhill. And we have to recognize those moments. They do become more impactful as the trial goes on if you start with negative self-talk at the beginning. Okay, so when you're doing those, I want you to, one, recognize and identify those moments of self-talk. So normally negative self-talk will have always or never in them, or they're going to have can't or won't. Okay, so something like my dog always falses. Ooh, okay, cool. We got some negative self-talk going. My dog can't find a high hide. Right? And those are things that I hear pretty frequently, but they're negative self-talk. They don't give you an opportunity to be successful because you're giving an absolute. So recognizing those things. And it also normally will focus on failure, which is, I think, a little bit more obvious for negative self-talk. The second one is putting that self-talk in perspective and possibly accepting it, because it might be a fact, but it doesn't mean that it's not a fact that can be changed. Okay, so you have to recognize that downward spiral that might be happening. Well, my dog is always falsing. Well, guess what? Now you're creating an environment where you've got some doubt, and then your dog falses because they're worried about you doubting them, right? And then we've got this spiral that happens downhill. Small things are not predictors of outcomes, right? So if you have a tiny little slip up, you got to know in NW3, one no does not kill your day, but it can if you let it. Right. And so recognizing those moments, recognizing that just one thing does not mean the rest of the day is done, or lumping issues together. Right. I find a lot of negative self-talk will be like, well, my dog can't do high hides. Okay, cool. When can your dog not do high hides? What are the conditions of the high hide that make them difficult? Right. So splitting out the problem now becomes something actionable. Oh, well, I guess they could do a high hide if it was on a pole. They're just struggling when it's in this environment. Okay, now we have some guidelines. Now we can start training to something versus an absolute. Okay, and then the last one is replacing the negative with positive, or at least neutral. Okay, so sometimes it's not true. We can't just flip it on its head and say, oh, but it's a positive situation. Well, yeah, maybe it's not true, but maybe we can put some caveats to it to make what sort of statement that you're making in your head a little more realistic and a little more actionable. So never can be turned to can. Okay, that's a typical like, okay, let's do to a positive, but always can be turned to sometimes, but only when ... Right? So then we can start changing that narrative and we can start finding where are my successes and where are my issues that maybe we can work on. And then we're trying to make them realistic without the self-hate or animosity to us or our dogs. Right? I do find that that relationship can really start to struggle when we start putting that narrative on our dogs and making them hold that. Okay, so we're trying to change that. We're also trying to change those statements by maybe talking to a friend, right? Sometimes just talking to somebody will help you talk out the issue and make it a little bit more realistic. And then it's not actually as bad as you think it is, because sometimes we just focus on it, tunnel vision. There's my problem, and this is all I could think about, and trying to keep that a little bit more open. And then performances can change, and you have to accept that you are where you are in your journey, but it doesn't mean that that's where you are going to be in a year. You have a lot of opportunity for change and growth, and allow that year and that journey to happen. And it's okay to say things are going to change a little bit. Okay. And then it often comes when we're being unkind to ourselves. Here's the standard, and I learned this from Andrea. You want to be your own best friend. Would you talk to your best friend that way? Typically not. And if you do, I'd say you probably have a bad relationship with that friend, right? Because you want to be kind to your friends, so you be kind to yourself. So if you're starting to recognize, oh, that's not something that I would really want to say to somebody else, maybe you shouldn't be saying it to yourself, right? And these are more like the personal things, and it's a little bit harder. But you can even say, I wouldn't say that to my friend's dog, right? My friend's dog always alerts on the wrong thing. Okay, you probably wouldn't say that. So then why are you saying it about your own dog, right? And trying to recognize those kinds of things. And then this is the caveat, and I think it's so important for us to recognize, not every day is a win. Okay, there are mistakes, there are bad days, there's other forces that are happening out there, and we're not always going to have those perfect days. And it's okay. It's okay to have the downs, because that's what makes the wins really fun. So it's okay. Allow it to be a journey. It doesn't have to be absolutes at any point in time. It is nice to have always great days, but recognize the journey, recognize the small movement towards the right thing. It might still be a no, but this time it was on you more than your dog, right? Little things like that. Okay. All right. Questions about that? Are we good? I'm ready to strangle my dog right now. No? Okay. She's like so mad. All right. So the second one is human triggers. This is what triggers you. Okay, as a human, this is what will eat away at your focus. This is what will eat away at your ability to stay in the present and stay in the moment. One is your dog's stressors. I can say this 100%. My dog, because of a trial actually, was sensitive to F-35 airplanes, which then turned into gunshots, which then turned into fireworks. And it became any loud noise that she was triggered to. Well, guess what? I'm triggered to those noises too, because I'm like, oh, I have to give her a cookie. Right. And I'm starting to get out of that because I have worked so hard on her counter conditioning. Well, it still conditions yourself. So you have to recognize when you are being triggered by your dog's triggers. If your dog is reactive to dogs, if your dog is reactive to males, if you like people, men, right? Or maybe tight spaces, you start making excuses and assumptions and basically helping your dog before they even show that they need help, which then creates a problem because then your dog feels they need to be helped. The dog feels the need to be worried because you're worried, right? And it becomes this cycle that is really hard to break because, yeah, maybe your dog does need that help, but recognizing your impact into that small little cycle is going to be very, very important. So yeah, triggers. Definitely your dog triggers are going to be your own triggers if they are big triggers. I don't know how many people, when we have searches around a pool, that are like, oh my God, it's around a pool. Like everybody is big. Okay, that's a trigger. Versus some dogs that like could care less about a pool. They're like, oh yeah, whatever, it's around a pool. You could see the triggers of the dogs versus the people, right? All right, so the second one is performance or competition anxiety, right? Just being judged. So, okay, we got a trigger stack. And maybe for some people that trigger stack goes from 0 to 10 very quickly. And then we've got room for 11 and 12, and that's it on top of that stack. Environmental. Some environments will make us less comfortable. Noisy environments. My dog's barking right now. You can tell I'm a little triggered by noisy environments. I don't like it, right? And so for me, I train past it. And I'll talk about that for a little bit. Weather. Okay, I had to put this photo in because it was like 2 inches of rain that we got that day. It was rainy. We were all wearing our raincoats. Typically in the search, the rain hood was up. You couldn't hear anything. The judges couldn't hear you. You couldn't hear the judges. And it becomes much more frustrating. Like it's just a little bit of a trigger. It's a little bit of a stressor because it's not comfortable and easy and I can just wear my normal clothes. You're like bundled up and there's all these layers and I'm restricted on movement. That will impact how you search, how you're able to be present on your dog, these small little triggers. Personal life. As much as we want to say, okay, our life is separate and I'm just going to be able to focus on my day, you have to accept that that might not always happen. Life is real and it can easily carry into our day and we're carrying that on our shoulders sometimes. So recognizing that that piece is there and you can't magically wish it away, but maybe we can tuck it into a little corner and say, I will deal with this later, but I'm going to step away right now. It's not gone, but it is a piece that I'm going to come back to later, right? So recognizing that we have that piece and that we can put that into a little pocket. Physiological stress, right? We talked about all the physical pieces of it, but that stressor, including pain, will affect your abilities. Okay. So that's a trigger stack. So if I'm now saying, okay, I'm tired, it's rainy, my neck is sore because I didn't sleep well, right? And we're starting to put all these things together, my decisions are going to be much different. I'm going to be more likely to call a false alert. I'm going to be more likely to step into my dog's way and not get out of their way when they're trying to work, right? All of those things. Events and situations, a dog barking at your dog, a human yelling at you for some random reason, right? All of those things can easily get pulled into your search. There's that extra little camel's straw, right? You're like, normally I can handle that, whatever, but because of other stressors, that becomes an issue. Human interaction, right? So maybe it's interactions that we like, or it's interactions that we don't like. Those can all get carried in. And then the last one is any sort of surprise or unexpected events, because that stuff happens. Quite literally in my last elite, there was a teacher with 2 students bursting into the middle of my elite search. First search of the day. My dog's riding high and she goes shooting into the classroom, not part of our search area. So I'm losing time. This is a huge space. I have 6 minutes. That's it, right? Surprise. Okay. Now, does that break the camel's back? Now, are you able to continue focusing, or do you just lose it and, okay, I'm done now? And then you just blame it and move on, right? We can't blame them. Like, the sport doesn't stop for stuff like that. It's how it is. And we have to be able to go with the flow and understand that that's how it is. And we have to be able to have that flexibility, which is what we'll talk about next week. All right, so these stressors are really important to recognize. Step number 1 is identifying them. I gave a huge list. I'm sure there's other stressors out there, but those are the ones that I could come up with. Number 2 is acknowledge them. They're real, right? You can't just like justify them away. They're stressors. They make you stressed, okay? They're not a bad thing, but you have to recognize them. Number 3 is accepting them and or managing them. Because sometimes we can manage our situation so we are not exposed to some of those. If you can control it, control it. So something physiological like eating or sleeping or pain, control it if you can. Sometimes pain management doesn't always work, right? So if we've got chronic pain, we got chronic pain, but we have to recognize maybe we can manage some things to make things easier. If it's situational, how can you set up your day to avoid it, right? So if we can set up a situation to make it a little bit easier, we avoid a person in the parking lot, or we have a nice little statement so that we don't have to talk to somebody that, even though we want to talk to, we know it will distract us, right? So we have these situations that we can manage. If you can control your interactions, control it, right? And then if you can't control it, accept it and allow it to be put in a box, maybe write it down and then come back to it after your search. But being able to separate yourself from something you understand, you've acknowledged, and you have identified that problem, you go, okay, I can't deal with this stressor right now. I'm going to accept that it's there. I'm going to deal with it later. I'm not bringing that in. But if you don't recognize that that is a stressor, it will come in with you to your search. Okay. All right. So the fourth one is prepare for next time. Can you proof train the stressor? So this is when I talk about noisy environments. I purposely put earbuds in with loud music that I don't necessarily like because I want to push my brain to go through it. Those who did the 30-second game this past week, I know there's a few comments in the forum that it was really frustrating. Exactly. That's kind of the point of what it does, is it puts you in this like uncomfortable state that you're like, oh, I have to restart my clock and I don't, right? And your dog's searching. One is teaching your dogs to ignore you a little bit, which is not a bad thing, right? It gets them off of your cues, but it also puts you into this kind of mindset of, can you start working through your stressors and understanding that it's just a stressor, and we say, okay, I'm moving on from it. It is not something that's going to affect me. Okay. Weather. If you have bad weather, get out and train in it. I don't know how many people train only in nice weather. Get out and train in the bad stuff, because that's what's going to show up at a trial and stress you out. So we work it. Okay. And then catch yourself in a daily activity when you react to your dog's trigger. Recognize when you are reacting to that trigger, whether your dog is present or not. Because I can tell you right now, every airplane that goes by, my ear goes, is that an F-35? Because I am so trained, because she's so fearful of them for a year, right? And I had to train past them. Now I still throw food at her, but I think we're pretty good on that point. But it's still, I have to recognize that my brain will go that direction, and that will help reduce that trigger and reduce the problem with our dogs. And then any sort of external thoughts to the search. And this is what we were talking about before, of working to move your focus, kind of like meditation, back to the search, pulling your brain and practicing that. Can you let go of something by writing it down and leaving it on your front seat vehicle, right? You just write it down. And you're like, this is a thing I'm going to deal with later. And writing it down allows you to step away from it, kind of like at sleep. And then you could say, I'm going to deal with this issue later, right? I actually do this all the time when I'm trial chair or helping run a trial, because I need to let go of a thing, but I don't want to forget about a thing because I had to remember it for some reason. So it goes in my phone. Remind me in 20 minutes, right? And then I go walk away and I do my search. And then I know I can let go because my phone's just going to go beep, beep, beep. And it's like, oh, here's your problem. Would you like it back for you? Right? And it can work really well for me that way. All right. So the last thing on mental management and self-care is parking lot talk. And I do find that it is important to recognize the impact of the parking lot, because I don't think we all recognize it necessarily. When we do the sport, it's unique from any other sport. It's blind, meaning we don't know the answers. It is very easy in the parking lot to overhear somebody else talking about a search. If you're leaning towards you need to get it out and talk to somebody, be very aware of this impact on somebody else, even if it's not the current search that you're working. It can impact how other people's work, and it might impact how they handle a search, even if they're not obviously like, oh, I know where the hide is, but they heard the word chair. And so now they're going to lean towards every single chair in the search versus they just follow their dog and let their dog work, right? So we do have to recognize that impact, and this sport is unique that way. The other piece of it is mental endurance, right? So when we do this, the impact of hearing and talking to people in the parking lot has an impact, because you're supposed to be working all day long with basically no information on how you're doing, which is really difficult. So I do find that some people are going to be more likely to talk to friends. They're going to be more likely to find that validation and figure out, was I right? Did I get this right? I don't know. So if you are, do not talk about the search until all the dogs are finished that search. Okay. Thumbs up. Yep, we did good. No no's. Those are nice words to say. They're nice and straightforward. And then you don't have any sort of communication of the search itself. That works great. And then also understand that your friend's experience within the search, and I bolded this, is not your experience. It can be separated by airflow changes. It can be separated by sun versus shade. Maybe the shade was in that moment. It can be separated with a door opened in the hallway down the way. And that can change a search so significantly, you wouldn't even believe it. It's little things like that. And so comparing notes is not always reflective of the reality of what that search is doing. Only the judge can see that stuff over a period of time. Okay. The yes zone may get expanded, may change slightly based on airflow. And so the first dog is not running the same search as the last dog. And you have to recognize that that change can happen. And it's hard to compare then, because you might have very different answers, very different results. Questions about that before we move on to grounding? Oh, I had a poll. All right, so we talked about self-talk. I have a poll for you guys. I figured out how to do a poll. So if you guys want to fill out the poll, this is about negative self-talk. So do you regularly in training have negative self-talk? Do you only have it when you trial? Sometimes when you trial, or very rarely? I'm curious on how everybody's at doing it. Because self-talk is pretty damaging and we have to recognize it.
I don't know how to answer this because I know that I have a certain issue, and then I know it's a weird issue.
But it's still negative self-talk.
What's the negative part about it? The fact that I know she has an issue?
Yeah, so then I would say when you trial, it becomes more of an issue because you are very willing to get through of your problem in training. And in trial, you get basically resigned to the fact that you have no control over it.
Yeah.
Right. So then that would be more when you trial only. So there's a few of you guys that have this in training. And I want you to recognize this. This is huge that we can start recognizing those negative self-talk moments when you train, because I find that's even more damaging than trialing, right? Because it's going to feed into everything you do. And so we have to recognize those moments. And how can we shift that thought to being something more neutral or productive, splitting it down somehow into something actionable. Cool. I'm going to end the poll.
Do we get to see the poll results, or they
You
have people's names?
Ta-da! Maybe did it show up?
Yeah.
Okay. I'm learning Zoom. We're playing with polls. So most of you guys, sometimes when you trial, I get those totally, they happen. Recognizing those moments and pulling yourself out. If you have those moments a lot when you trial or in training, hey, let's break it down. Let's figure out some actionable items. Because normally that's something that we can deal with, or we can figure out how can we manage for it, right? All right, cool. Oh, is this still sharing? I think you guys can probably hit X and it will get rid of it. All right, so we're before, during, and after the trial or search. We talked about the 3-breath trick. How many who are trialing this weekend tried that? Anybody? Yeah, good job, Christy. She's like, yes, I did. I find that the 3-breath trick really helps. I know I was doing it, and I definitely took my opportunities to visualize when I was doing it.
I recommended it to my friend this weekend.
Good.
At her trial, because I didn't get in, but she got in. I'm like, just breathe, breathe, breathe.
Breathe. Those 3 breaths are important. It's amazing what you can do. So then, okay, so that's a grounding technique, right? The second grounding technique that I'm going to give you guys, and this is like normally after something happens that we can give this, is the rule of 5. And this is from Andrea Harrison, 100%. I've got her FDSA course right now, which is Unleashing Your Personal Potential, I think is what it's called. It's still open for anybody who wants to play at bronze level with her. And she also has a whole bunch of stuff on her heart, which is like journals and webinars and all these fun things. So resources there if you want to explore this more. But the rule of 5, will it matter in 5 seconds? Maybe, right? We're still feeling the feelings. Will it matter in 5 minutes? Sometimes no, not at all. Will it matter in 5 hours? So now we're thinking about down the day, we've done a few more searches. Did that moment matter? Sometimes no. 5 days, 5 months, 5 years. Once we get to 5 years, it's amazing what doesn't matter. We will not remember that false alert. We will only remember that our dogs wanted to play with us, right? So we have to recognize those 5s. The rule of 5s is really important because it can really start putting things in perspective. There's nothing, yeah. So what's interesting is last trial that I went to, the judge was like, I just had to tell the person, like, it's not life or death. You're here to have fun with your dog, right? And the judge was saying this to another volunteer, and it's true because I think some of us go in with like so much on the line. We've trained so hard that we forget to breathe, that we forget like all these things that this is fun. We're going out there to have fun with our dogs, to play a game, to try and test our skills and pretend we're police dogs, right? That's really what we're doing, is we're pretending that we get to be real. And so putting things like this in perspective can really help, because it really doesn't matter. That you got to know if the rest of the search is really fun, who cares, right? Or, hey, I had a no this weekend, didn't even find one hide. He went into the container search and he hit a fringe, whatever, right? I called too early, whatever. But he settled down. We wore our boots. I managed to keep him dry so that he didn't slip on it with his boots. Like, I was feeling pretty happy about, he got into that search and he started working. He had a little moment of craziness, but he started working. So for me, I walked out going, oh, crap, I had a no. And we didn't even find a hide. Okay. But I'm also going, he worked, right? So finding those joy moments is going to be very important for something like this. All right. Visualization. This is during your conscious breathing. So right before going into search, and I definitely did this before our last container search, I was doing this a lot actually. If you feel those nerves building, right? We've talked about changing the narrative and all those things. If it's still not working, I do find just breathing and visualizing your dog's movement through the space. That can really help in that last chair of putting you actually in the moment before you get there. And it changes your ability. So when you see it, you go, oh, okay, yeah, that's where that is. Okay, cool. And you're so familiar with it already that you've already started your search before you started it. And it allows you to feel a little bit more prepared as you go in. So it's a good one. And then the last one is a giggle. Laugh with your dog. Like, it is so hard because we get so serious that, like, just look at your dog and see how excited they are for your cookie. That's kind of a fun thing to see because you have power over your dog. You want a cookie? Yes, yes, yes. The head goes up and down and up and down. Realize that, giggle with your dog. They're enjoying themselves. They're getting cookies. You should enjoy yourself as well, right? So that laughter, even if it's like fake it till you make it, right? They say smile because it will start changing, this activating those muscles in your mouth. Laughter does the same thing. Fake laughter starts changing your body's response and it will help with the situation. Now, we're not talking joker, maniacal laughter, right? We're just giggling, right? Laughter is fun. And that's what we're trying to do. All right. Should have, could have. Anybody have should have, could have moments? Oh gosh, I think we all do. And I actually have, let me see. Oh yeah. Look I got a new poll. I figured it out. Okay, so how long at your last trial did you spend thinking of your last should have moment? So 1 minute until the next search, all day trial, or still thinking of it? Because I know some of us are still thinking of it. There's like a lot of people still thinking of it. Those should have moments. I should have called that. I shouldn't have called it false. Right? Those kind of moments. A lot of people are still thinking of their last should have moments.
So Alex, I gotta confess, I don't think of it during the trial, but when I come home and I'm thinking of things like, what did I do wrong? How could I have?
Yeah.
Oh yeah, he did actually alert and dummy me didn't see it. I mean, I'm thinking of it the day after more than I am at the trial, I think.
Interesting.
Yeah, that's true.
Yeah, could. All right, so here's the results. 9 out of 12 of you guys are still thinking about it. So let's talk about should have moments. This is a good timing for this. All trial day until the next search or 1 minute. So kind of when I'm talking about should have moments, I'm talking about the ones that are a little bit more toxic, meaning you're beating yourself up over them, right? And so these are a little different than I think everybody's like thinking about it slightly different. But I really want to talk about the should have moments where you were like, I should have. Like if I could have just done that, I would have been fine, right? Those kind of like really aggressive thoughts that we have at ourselves. So they become toxic. So we talked about like should have moments can help training. They can help you guide how your training goals go, but they become toxic when you beat yourself up over them, right? So you go, oh, I was so stupid. Why didn't I call that? Right? Those kind of moments. That's toxic. That's not going to be helpful. And normally there's a reason why you made a decision in the moment. Okay. So maybe you weren't there mentally, right? We talked about self-care. So maybe there's some triggers, physiological or mental. Okay. So maybe that was a piece, or you were totally there and you made a decision. Was it a training issue for your dog? Maybe your dog gave you a false alert because their ABCs are not clear, right? So they're thinking human pressure and box plus some fringe odor should mean alert. Okay, maybe there's some ABC issues happening. And that's a training thing. We can go back and fix that. Is it an observation failure? Which then we go, okay, my goal is to be figuring out what does my dog look like before they're alerting? What does a false alert look like? So that's an observation thing. Or is it a result of that moment at that time? This is where we get into the comparisons. Oh, well, so-and-so called it. I should have been able to call that. I was in that place. I put my dog's nose. Hey, experience just didn't happen that time, right? Airflow just changed for you. It was just a little bit different. Maybe that environment was just something your dog wasn't prepared to work, right? So then we just put that on the list and split it down. All right, what if you are not able to break down that moment? It becomes toxic. If those should-haves don't have an answer, they don't have something productive to go to, you do need to let go, right? Also, you need a way to figure out what happened. If you don't have video, you don't have a clear understanding of what happened, which typically happens when we don't have video or somebody else watching, you might have to let go of that situation because there is no solution. I had a false alert, it's probably about 1.5 years ago, and I still remember it, but it was on a broom in the middle of a big space, nowhere near a hide. I have no answer. Maybe it was, I don't know, dog poop, but it was full on alert from Tana, which she never gives me a full alert, or her poop. I don't know what it was. I can't get an answer from that, right? If I still say I shouldn't have called that. How do I know, right? Like she gave me an alert. I trusted it. I have to move on from that because I don't have any answer to train. I don't have anything that I could go from. I just have to accept that that happened and we move on and whatever, it's fine. And then the last one is it's based on someone who's biased knowing where the hides are. So if you have a should have moment because your judge says, you should have covered that space over here, you should have gotten this, or you should have done this, right? And judges will say this stuff. I hear trainers say this stuff too, or friends, because maybe they were spectating in AKC. You have to understand somebody who knows where the hides are biased. They are not watching your dog's changes of behavior specifically away from the odor. You are. You're going in there blind. You are watching every motion of your dog. That judge is not. So it drives me bananas when judges say stuff like that, because they were not watching your dog's change of behavior on the cookie that was underneath the cabinet. They were only watching the hide. And so if you take that advice and you take that should have from that judge, and you start doubting what you saw and you start doubting what happened, well, no, my dog had the same change over there. How am I supposed to trust that one and not this one? Right? That's toxic. And we have to recognize that advice, that information may be biased, and it's coming from somebody who has a different point of view than what you do as a blind competitor, right? So you have to remember that. And they're only seeing you in a moment of time. They don't know your journey. They don't know all the pieces. They don't know what you've struggled with. So your handling decision might be based on history, and it might be based on a journey. And that's okay. It's not based on what that judge knows necessarily. They know their training method. They know what they understand for that type of dog, or what they think your dog is, right? It's not necessarily what actually is happening. So recognize that. Right? So just because a judge has some information, or they might be really well trained, they don't know your journey, your dog, or that moment for your dog. Okay. So just be very, very aware of that, because I do find that judges sometimes will offer their advice much more easily than maybe they should, because they're only seeing one piece of the puzzle. Okay. All right. So in order to make these should have moments productive, you do have to find the small nuggets of potential within them. What can you add to a training goal, right? It's really important. If you can't figure it out, talk to somebody, like if you're my student, talk to me. Let's look at videos. Let's break it down. Let's figure out what was in that moment. If you're holding on to it, let's figure out, is there something that we can train from this? Or is it something that we need to let go and just say, it was what it was? And that sucks, right? And that can happen. I have those moments. I think everybody has those moments where it just doesn't really have an easy, straightforward answer. It just was how it was that moment, right? If that should have moment results in you doubting your dog, we've got a problem, okay? If that happens, that means you need to go back and build trust as your training exercise. So even though you can't fix or understand what happened with a false alert or a no or anything, right? Or you called finish and you missed a hide, right? So if you can't understand what happened there, you have to make sure you're not doubting your dog along that line. And so then we just have to build up more trust, and that is your training goal. Okay. There is a kind of a cool blog post that I found. I've linked it here. This is from Dog Agility. It's from a few years ago. Basically, it sums up to control what you can, let the rest go, focus on the process, which we're going to talk about the process a little bit in week 6. But kind of keeping that mental perspective of this is a sport, we're having fun, and you can't always have the perfect run. You can't always have everything go perfectly, and we have to accept what we can accept. All right, so then the last piece is perspective on gratitude. So when I looked up like gratitude sports or something like that, this is what came up, and I think it's pretty good. Gratitude helps people feel the positive emotions, relish the good experiences, improve their health, deal with adversity, and build strong relationships. Sounds pretty good, right? To me, it seems, and this is kind of a standard answer, right? These are like culminated. I don't know exactly where Google pulled this up from. It just was like the top line when it pulled up, but it is exactly what I'm trying to get at, is having some gratitude will change your perspective, and it'll allow you to find those joy moments, okay, when you're out there. And when we do this, and it's interesting because I used to put out a gratitude box. I have to get to it for the next trial. And it was a little piece of paper, and you say what you're grateful for. And it kind of goes through. And I find the majority of people who put things in there, I'm grateful for my dog. I'm grateful that we get to play this together. I'm grateful for the club, right? It's very generalized things. And I can tell you that these kind of like gratefuls, yeah, they're great. But at the same time, they're not going to mean very much to you. I don't think that they're going to bring the relish good experiences, improve your health, blah, 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 right? They're not that deep. They're not going to get you there. It's where the small things happen. It's the small successes to celebrate those moments. That's what's going to get you some of these really grateful, joyful moments. So trying to find those. And these are the things that are normally priceless. So it's not a title. It's experiences, it's moments, right? You can laugh at them. You can like smile. They bring you joy when you think about them. Those are the grateful moments. Okay. So after every search, here's your like job. I want you to find these moments, make it a note, either mentally or write it down. And I want you to find these moments in every single search. So here's an example. I ran George in the NW2 this past weekend. Here are my grateful moments. And you can notice he didn't title. That's okay. I had a blast. So I went with friends and we had a good old time with tarps and we huddled in the rain and it was pouring underneath. Like that was really fun. To me, that's going to be a moment that I'm going to remember for a long time because I don't get a lot of those. I often travel by myself. So having something like that was really fun. I'm going to remember that. I'm really grateful for that kind of moment. George was able to settle into his searches. He was big boy. I felt like I walked out of the search more than once going, I see a little bit of Tana in him. I was pretty grateful about those moments. I was able to read when he was pooling in the exterior search and get out of the way and understand what was happening. I was pretty grateful that I could have that mindset, that I can understand that. And then this is like the epitome of the photo. Melissa sent this to me immediately as soon as she got home and she was downloading them, because this search, the start line's back here, there is a red ball, like red ball I'm talking about. And it's about here. It was about 10 feet off of the end of the search. And nobody else seemed to see it. I think like one or two other competitors said, oh yeah, there was a ball, wasn't there? George found it from the very start. We didn't even start. And his head, he's got all excited. I'm like, oh, you're excited about containers. Okay, cool, awesome. And I saw where he was looking. I'm like, we're running for the ball, aren't we? And you can't really see it here. Let me just show you really quick. Look at my face in this. This is why I'm grateful, because of moments like this. Do you see my face? I'm like, okay, we're going for a ride. I'm smiling because I can't control that. He's a young boy. He's running for a ball. If I tried to fight it, I knew we were just going to have a fight. So we're just going to play with it. I'm actually going to remember that search probably for the rest of his life. And I can't wait for the rest of the photos because I know definitely I want the whole line of him running to the ball and he attacked the ball, was playing with the ball, playing with sticks, right? He had a great time. He actually found the hide. I'm amazed he found the hide. I wasn't really even believing him that he could find it after that kind of arousal, but I'm going to remember that. So I'm grateful for that really stupid boy moment, but it was really funny. It was fun. So I want you to find these kind of experiences. This is where the gratitude happens, where you're going to have fun. Like this is fun at a scent work competition. This isn't necessarily goals. This isn't necessarily achieving his NW1 or anything like that. It's just really fun. Yeah, Kathy's one with the feathers is just ridiculous, but it was so fun, right? So I find like these are the moments that we need to remember. And it's not the moments typically that we have captured on film. It's not the moments that we capture necessarily as titles or like advertising on Facebook, right? These aren't the memories that pop up, but they're the memories that I want you probably to capture and hold a little bit closer. So this is your challenge. Find those gratitude moments that make you laugh, that make you cherish the sport, that make you cherish your dog. Okay. This is what will matter to you in 5 years. This is what will matter. Okay. All right. So your homework this week is perspective. Assignment number 1 is identifying self-talk. Okay. So I want you to find one video that went bad. And I'm saying this in quotes because we all know that bad searches have a lot of value. So if it went bad, what is the negative self-talk that comes to mind? Is it focused on things you can control? And then change your self-talk, make it neutral or split it down into something actionable. And then find some sort of moment of success within that same search. So even though by search, we had like a minute and a half chasing a ball and a stick and having a whole bunch of fun, he found the hide. And he worked through pooling odor that was like 1.5 inches on the tops of all the containers. So there's a moment of success towards my goals, right? Even though I could easily have a lot of self-talk, negative self-talk. He's just so focused on toys and blah, 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 right? I could go down that alley. I'm not. I'm having a good time with that guy, okay? All right, so that's assignment number 1. Assignment number 2 is your triggers. You can share these or not. You can write these. I do recommend you write these down somewhere so that you can refer back and you can recognize. We're acknowledging and identifying. So list your human triggers. And then I want you to identify which ones can you control, which ones can you accept, and which ones can you train for. Okay. Because I want you to recognize those pieces. Okay. Questions? Comments? You guys like the polls? That was kind of fun. I was happy with the polls. Okay, good. If I get time, I'll try and do polls again. I'm saving the false alert stuff because I really want to work on no's and what happens after a no for next week in the pliable week. We're going to work on that next week. So if you've got a few more, bring them on in. I'll make sure that they get put in and we're going to play with them.
I have a question. So when it's kind of going to the false alert. So I think maybe it's not so much that I don't trust my dog. Maybe I don't trust myself.
Aha. Yeah.
Because like, so my 2 NW1s, so I didn't get into my 3rd NW1 this weekend, which is great because I still got to use it for arousal training, taking them into new spots. But so I failed on both times on vehicles, and I love searching vehicles. That's like one of our fun things. And both times I feel like I've rushed it and I'm like, oh my God, I just want to take back alert. You know, at the moment. Now the second one in Sedona, I don't think I would have done anything differently because every search that she did, she was very different in her character from all the searches we've ever done in the past.
Yeah.
But so how do I get to myself? So when we talk about it, maybe save it for next week. How do I get myself to slow down and search that second vehicle? So that's something that I want to work on, and that'll help me in all my other searches too, not just with vehicles.
Totally. So okay, cool. We're identifying some issues, right? And the issue is that you're making decisions too quickly. So how can we slow down that mental, like, I can breathe, I can slow down. And I know you struggle from a little bit of performance anxiety, right?
Yes.
So there's a huge trigger. You're already putting yourself at a 10. And so then on top of that, if you have any sort of physiological stress, pain management, or events or situations, because she can be a little bit reactive, right? So it just takes one dog looking at her and you go, oh, don't do that, right? And then now you've put yourself at performance anxiety plus trigger stacking. So then we have to start recognizing, okay, here is what's happening. How can I manage for it? Or I just say, oh, I am being reactive to other dogs because I'm worried about my dog. And then just acknowledging that can put some control over the situation and you know what's going on. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it does make sense.
And then some of these other grounding techniques will get you somewhere.
Okay.
Because they actually mean something versus, okay, I'm just breathing. Not recognizing all these other things that are pushing you, that are impacting what's going on. And you moved recently too, right? So there's a lot of things that are happening.
Yeah, we moved. We hit the Sedona the week after we moved. We went back to California and did the 2 specialty trials and then the 1 AKC. We did, and that was an amazing weekend. She did amazing. And we screwed up on our unburied, but at the end of the day, I was like, we're just done. And we did amazing for the weekend.
Good.
3 days, 3 trials.
Yeah. That's
so,
huge. That's huge.
Yeah.
And so then there's something, and I didn't put this in here, but it is important. Trial miles do count. And we'll talk about this a little bit in post-trial for the week 6, but there is a reason to enter trials close proximity because it does put them in a better state to be able to perform better for your dog, but also for you. Okay. So trial miles do count. Because Tana had puppies, so it was like a year between elite trials. That first trial back was brutal. Like, I think we're 11th and we typically sit at like 5th to 1st, right? We're kind of in that book. We're number 11th and we were barely hanging on until that very last search. But something like that, it's because she hadn't searched in a long time. I didn't search in a long time. So me, and especially at upper levels, the experience and the comfort of calling finish, right? You doubt your dog, you doubt the situation. Am I missing something? And you start going down that path very easily. The more experience and more quick in short succession you have trials, it does become a little bit easier. So like I've entered Tana at the end of the month in AKC because I want her to continually be trialing. And this is what we see at the summit level for NACSW is those dogs are not allowed to enter elite anymore because they've got their championship. And so they're not competing. And so then they come into summit and it's hard. It's hard to watch some teams because they're not playing, they're not practicing. And so, well, they're practicing, but they're not getting the trial miles. And it does show, it really does show for those teams that are able to get those trial miles and those who are not. So it does really show. So there is a reason. And that's why AKC is kind of nice because you can keep playing. And that's what I plan on doing with my dog when I can't play NACSW anymore, that we're going to continue playing that. So that's something to consider in there. And that's why progression can get better over time. And I was actually going to go through, I pulled it out, all of Tana's data, and I was going to see if I could graph it and show you guys, like when the trials are in short succession, that improvement actually shows, because you could do that. Now that's with a team that is trained and confident in each other, that trust is there, right? So this isn't a team that's not trusting, because many trials in a row and you don't trust your dog, then both trusts in each other start decreasing, right? So that's where the trial miles can become a problem. And you have to be able to recognize that and build that back up. Trust is important.
Thank you.
Yeah. There's a lot of elements, lots of things to think about. All right. Well, this was a fun week, you guys. And hopefully, I know the homework is not super interactive and there's not like searches for you guys to do, but I find that this is the important piece. This is what allows you to be able to compete and be able to be there for your dog. This is the important stuff. All right. So I'm going to stop the recording there.